Hey, this is Adam Anderson. I am one of the co-founders of Threat Captain, and I am one of the hosts of the Crow's Nest. It is our podcast, and it's our mission to help normalize and celebrate sales. Kind of gets a bad name and a bad rap inside of managed service provider community, and so we're gonna change that. These are superheroes wearing capes, bringing in revenue, covering payroll. All right, let's talk a little bit about what sales is. Actually, how about I give you a quick overview? I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing sales and what sales is. Talk a little bit about the different kinds of approaches to sales and how they're not wrong or right. It's just how do you use them and at what time. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between strategy and tactics, right? Two different things. So let's get into it. So here's the thing. I believe a business exists in order to bring a solution to a problem to a group of people who are suffering some kind of pain or lack that solution is going to resolve. And it's going to be a mutually beneficial exchange where the value goes to the person who has the problem and money goes to the person providing the solution. And when it's done right, then both parties actually are getting a value exchange where they leave happy and grateful, and they get referrals and the businesses grow and the people with the problems have their solutions and life is great. So the act of negotiating all of that right there, finding that equitable exchange of value for money, that is called sales, right? It's not just pitching ideas at people or trying to manipulate them into buying something. When sales is done right, there is a great match between the value that a company is bringing to the game and the resolution to the problem that the customer is experiencing, right? If you ever come across a salesperson who doesn't believe in their product, who doesn't think that they're doing something really good or have a competitive advantage because of that exchange is better than what somebody else can do, well, typically that salesperson is pretty sad, depressed, and looking for another job. It does matter that you are producing value and you're just not trying to sell and witchcraft the whole thing up. All right, so that is the overview of business and what sales does inside of business. Without sales, no one makes payroll. You don't get the agreement, you don't move the money, you have the best product in the world, but if someone doesn't buy it, it means nothing. Matter of fact, that reminds me. So I did a tour of duty as the entrepreneur in residence over at Clemson University. I remember I was at this networking event. We were on the seventh floor of the one building and looking out through this giant pane of glass. And this really smart young man came up to me and he started to explain how he just couldn't wait to become an entrepreneur. And I said, well, great, tell me what's going on. And he probably talked about 20 minutes on this cool piece of tech. And it's like, man, that sounds great. Well, how are you bringing it to market? Who's got the problem that this tech is solving? He's like, oh, I'm not interested in selling it. I just really like the technology. And I said, my friend, you are a inventor. You are not an entrepreneur. Very important to know the difference because inventors who try to be entrepreneurs are very, very frustrated. And really the difference between being an inventor and an entrepreneur is the ability to sell the cool thing you invented to the people who actually need it. Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of sales. There's a lot of ways to have this conversation, a lot of ways to think about it. But I like to start with the difference between the kind of sale, being it a complex sale or a simple sale. And then how do you go about that? Are you a hunter or are you a farmer? And then at the end of the day, what strategies are you using to fulfill that? Now, I don't want to say it's one or the other because I've had complex sales and simple sales with the same customer. The idea as a salesperson, you have to know what kind of, sale are you in so you don't use the wrong tactics and techniques. So complex versus simple. So a simple is typically there's one decision maker who has authority, pain, and budget. They have the ability to make a decision. They're the one experiencing the pain, and they actually have the money to buy the thing. Often, you know that you're in a complex sale when you're talking to somebody who has pain, meaning they're the ones suffering the problem. They have no budget and they have no ability to solve the problem. For managed service providers, what typically happens is that we do a great job selling our solutions and doing a match of our solutions with the person who has the pain and they have the authority, right? So they're making the decision if this is the right thing to do, but they seldom have the budget. So that means that unless we are able to handle that budget part of the complex sale, we have a lot of great meetings and then the thing just goes away. It's that. So a complex sale means I understand that they're different humans that have pain, authority, and budget, and I have to sell to all three of them and get three yeses because I can have two yeses and one no, and the deal is dead. Simple is I have one person who encapsulates all three of those. That makes sense? I don't know why I'm asking you. This is one way. I'm talking about a camera. If it makes sense, say yes somewhere, wherever this ends up. It'll be great. All right. So you figured out, am I in a complex sale or am I in a simple sale? And maybe I'm a little bit of both depending on what I'm selling at the time, especially if you sell back into a customer and over and over and over again. You could start with a complex sale. And then after you have all the approvals, you move over into simple sales. That's actually what a lot of enterprises like. Closing the deal at the beginning is very complex. But when you actually have the budget and you have the roadmap, and it's very easy to operate inside of your agreements to do simple sales and direct closes. So that's also kind of the difference between hunting and farming. I look at farming as going after, exploring, hey, I have existing customers or I have people who have established trust with, and they're very, very friendly, and they often come to me with problems, or they're very, very open to me having those kind of conversations. In particularly, I almost think of farming as order taking. Now, that's not necessarily true, but for this example, especially if you're an MSP, you're farming when you keep having the same conversations with your client, and you're either upselling your client, you're doing your QBRs, and you're exploring where the next strategy needs to come from. And again, if you're doing this the right way, you're doing a consultative-based sell. And we can talk a little bit about that in just a second. So yeah, that is farming. Hunting is net new business, and chances are they've either never heard of you, which is cold prospecting, and that's the lowest conversion. But more likely than not, the way you're most successful is when the marketing department qualifies a lead through its messaging. And by the time it gets to you, the salesperson, the person you're talking to is already pretty interested in what's going on. So there's this awareness scale where a customer is unaware of your solution, or even that they have a problem, then they become problem aware, then they begin exploring different solutions, and they look at different products, and then finally they're looking at your company and seeing which deal is right, and then boom. So as a salesperson, you want them at least to be somewhere in that solution product awareness, because that means they're shopping ready to buy. If you get them too soon when they're unaware about the problem or they're just exploring the problem, you waste a lot of times doing demos on people who are just kicking tires. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lost leader, or I'm wasting time like I'm never going to close anything. But if you know that you're trying to close revenue that quarter or that week, and somebody is like, well, I'm just trying to learn, you don't want to I tell you what, personally, when I get on the phone and I think I'm about to close somebody and if the meeting's going great, and then at the end they're just not ready and they barely know what they're talking about, and it's super depressing. Maybe you guys are better at it, but for me, that hurts my feelings. And so if I really want to make sure that I understand, am I hunting, farming, or where they are in that entire hierarchy? Great. So when you're hunting, you're using different kinds of tactics than you would when you're farming. And that's kind of what we're going to jump into now. We're going to look at the different strategies or different types of strategies versus the tactics inside of them. So we're going to keep this super high level. Strategies and tactics all by itself can be an amazing episode. And what I want to do is bring people in to actually talk about those, how they actually execute. But at a high level, you have two funnels. You have the marketing and awareness funnel that's right up on the top, and that's like 7 different layers in a V, where they go from are they a lead to are they a prospect, all the way through until they're finally aware enough that they should be handed to a salesperson or a sales process. So if you're a product led where people are going to buy without ever talking to a human, you still have to go through all this because you're still warming a person up and introducing them to what you do, how you do it, and the problem that you're solving, and seeing if it's a match with the way they want to do that. So marketing all the way through, down we get to awareness. And this is where I like to start. So awareness is them saying, hey, I think I want to work with you. The next step is discovery. What most of us do when we first start in sales is as soon as someone shows up and says, hey, I might want to buy from you, you say, great, here's my stuff. In Sandler, we call that spilling your candy. You walk into the office and you just spill your candy everywhere, and it's a giant mess. And it actually is so traumatic to the buyer. Most of the time they pull back. Well, I thought I was ready to buy. So they're not lying to you. They're just not aware of where they're supposed to be with the whole thing. And if you come on too strong, sometimes it does work, but you really increase your close rates and shorten your sales cycle when right after they show awareness, you move into discovery. This means you're asking questions. This means you're discovering if there's a fit. It's a lot like dating, right? If you went on a date with somebody and they're like, hey, I think I like you, and then you just started talking at them and tell them how awesome you are for the next hour, you're probably not going to get that second date, are you? Are you? Well, I don't think that's a great bet. No, it's fine. Everything's good there. But that's the same thing with sales. If someone rolls in and say, hey, I think I might want to buy from them, and then you talk at them for an extended period of time, if they were not already ready to buy, they're probably going to be turned off onto that. And also, remember, the definition of business was an equitable relationship. Your job as a salesperson is to figure out if your solution is going to actually solve their problems. And is it going to solve their problems in a way that's actually worth the price point you want to charge? See, when you jump right in without doing a sufficient amount of discovery, often price becomes the primary driver. Price and ease of use. If you don't do enough discovery, you take yourself out of the opportunity to actually have a value-based conversation. And that's no bueno. We don't want to do that because value to value is what we're interested in. Adult to adult. That's the game. All right. So, right after discovery goes into evaluation. So, by this point in time, after discovery, you come and say, hey, this is probably how we can work together. Is this something you'd be interested in trying? Often than not, they'll say, yes, I would like to see a proposal. I would like to understand what you had in mind. And then, depending on your business or depending on how you do what you do, you give them something. Now, if it's a simple sell, they make a decision and then it's done. But in a complex sell, they take what you gave them and they turn around and they bring it to the other decision makers. So if you were talking to the economic buyer, they would go take it to the technology person and the end user. And if you were talking to the technology person, they would have to go ask for budget. So I don't know if you've ever been on a call where they say, well, we need to get this person, this person, this person on the call. What they're actually saying is, I don't have the authority to make the decision, or I don't have the budget, or I don't know if it's a fit for the pain. So being able to get ahead of that in your discovery process means that you are able to then support that person. So for example, here's 9 times out of 10 what's going to happen. If you are a managed service provider selling cybersecurity and you just sold in a very elegant, wonderful solution to the, we'll call it the IT director of Acme Incorporated. That IT director is going to say, thank you, this solved all my problems. Now I have to go get budget to pay for this. That person turns around, and now you're expecting and hoping that person can sell as well as you did back to their CFO or their controller or their budget holder. And for this example, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. And I mean that literally, it's more like 83% of the time, the deal dies right there. And then that person who you had an amazing meeting with just ghosts you. And that's not what we're here for. No, because they actually need what you have to sell. It's just that person isn't equipped to turn around and sell back to the CFO. The same thing's true when you have a CFO or a budget holder find something that's super cheap and they're like, I love it. This is great. It's going to be very cheap. And they try to shove that towards the IT people. It doesn't get along. The idea here is that if you are in a complex sell and you are now in that, what is it? It goes awareness, then discovery, then exploration. That's where we are. If they're in that exploration, you either need to equip that person who's going to go talk to the other budget holders and the other decision makers with all of the stuff so it's super easy for them to explain it, or you need to go with them. Frequently, something like, hey, I know that it is often complicated to get approvals in a company like yours. I am more than happy to be on call and be available. Why don't we schedule a few meetings with the people who are going to make the actual choice alongside of you? So that way, I'm not putting you out there and you don't feel like I'm happening to you. And then they will often say, no, I got this, but try it anyway, right? Because that's the best of all worlds. My goal is for you to be able to navigate this process so that you can be with those other decision makers. Because in order to move from hunting to farming, then you have to have relationships with this. So any opportunity to build relationships with the different buying types inside of an organization, especially in a complex sell, you absolutely should do that. I have many problems in the past where all I did was obsess about the people with the pain. And they loved me and I loved them and it was great, except when they got fired or when they got promoted or took a new job. Now all of a sudden I have to rebuild all the relationships and all the goodwill was only with that one person. You owe it to yourself to expand out across budgets and across departments as soon as you possibly can, if that makes sense or is appropriate. Great. So let's talk a little bit about strategies and tactics. So strategies are the idea of, hey, well, let me say it this way. Strategies are the plans, the overarching plans, like, hey, we should do relationship building, or maybe we should adopt a consultative-based selling model, or hey, maybe in this particular case, we need to go right at them and they want to make fast decisions. So let's go ahead and use that as a tactic. I mean, as a strategy. And often you set your strategies beforehand where you have all of the different things that you can do, and then based off of previous experience and how discovery goes, you will then adopt a strategy and move forward with it. And it's okay to change your mind, by the way. Sales is not a step 1 through step 10, because we're dealing with people. People are going to be chaotic, weird, and delightful. So are you. So then let's talk about tactics. Well, tactics are the specific action. So for example, if you're trying to do discovery, what you don't want to do is just ask them yes no questions. You want to actually ask them questions where they get curious and they start saying things. So that's called, like, hey, let's ask open-ended questions and let's do some active listening and do things like, hey, what I think I heard you say is, pretend like you've been in marriage counseling for many, many, many years and you learned how to communicate. Matter of fact, I highly suggest it as part of your sales training. Why don't you go get some marriage counseling, even if you don't need it? Actually, don't do that. I don't want to get angry letters. My marriage was great. We went to counseling. That's horrible. I don't want that. But it is actually a great tactic, is to say, listen, I'm so excited about all this, but I really love extreme clarity. Let me repeat back what I think I heard you say. And they love it. People love being mirrored. They love having their words repeated back. They love hearing heard and understood. And so those are great tactics. So what you do is you look at the different strategies, and then you look at the different phases of the sales cycle, and then you make sure you have a whole bunch of tactics inside of it. Those are often called playbooks. Playbooks are the tactics that sit inside of strategies. And by the way, tactics can move across strategies and they can move up and down in the funnel. It's fantastic. It's great. But if you have 5 or 6 of them and you have a couple of strategies, you're going to do really, 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 really good. Okay. So let's do our last little bit here. I just kind of want to reiterate, back at the beginning of this, we said that business was the act of taking something that the world needs and bringing it to those who need it, and doing that in a way that's sustainable for both. And that sales is the thing that is the one person, the one entity in the entire organization that's laser focused on that negotiation and making sure that happens. So if you haven't heard it in the recent past, let me just say thank you, salespeople. Without you, we're just really crazy cool inventors playing with our toys. With you, we actually make a business happen. And if you're doing this, if you're on the front lines, whether you're a hunter, an account manager, a farmer, a customer success, wherever you are, if you're customer facing and you are absolutely doing the best you can to make sure that there's a fit between solutions and problems, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are rock stars. All right, I'm Adam Anderson. You'd listened to an episode of The Crow's Nest. I'm one of the co-founders of Threat Captain. And hey, I really appreciate you taking a moment and trying to explore some of this with me. We'll dive into more of these topics in depth later, but I thought it'd be great to do a high-level overview of the different ways of thinking about sales and how to experiencing it in your day-to-day. See ya.